Hey, what's up guys? Sloth King here. Today we're going to be working on my 4th gen Toyota 4Runner. It is a 2008 V6 and we are going to be replacing the inner and outer tie rods on this vehicle. So it's not too bad of a job to do. You just got to make sure that you have the proper tools in place. So let's go over what you're going to need and let's jump right into this. So first thing, you are going to need a jack and some jack stands. Jack up your vehicle, take your wheels off, and then these are the tools that we're gonna need. You're gonna need a torque wrench, you're gonna need a breaker bar. You will need a ball joint separator. This will take your tie rod ends off a lot easier than just whacking it. This right here, this tool is to take off your inner tie rod whenever we get to it. This just clamps around this little ball right here, and that allows us to just take it off. You will need an extension if you cannot get the inner tie rod tool off properly. If you are not replacing your outer tie rods, I recommend picking up a paint marker. This will mark the location of where your inner tie rods sit, so that way you can just replace the inner tie rods, or vice versa. If you're just replacing the outer tie rods, go ahead and get a marker, and I'll show you this here in a little bit. You will need some sockets. We're mostly going to be using a 19 millimeter today. I recommend some gloves, an impact wrench. You will need a hammer. You will need a longer pry bar along with the hammer. You will need some pliers, some cutters. You will need a 22 millimeter wrench for the jam nut on the tie rod itself. As for the boots, I'm replacing my boots. I got OEM Toyota boots. I will list the part numbers in the description below. Same thing with new inner clamp boot clips. If you don't want to get these, you can just get some zip ties. And then you are going to need some inner and outer tie rods. I got OEM Toyota outer tie rods. As for the inner ones, I forget what brand this is, but they are an OEM supplier. I will list them in the description below. And yeah, that's about it. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. I'm going to do one side and then the other side is going to be complete mirrored process. So as we're going through it, I will list the torque specs as we go. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump right in. All right guys, so what I'm going to show you first, if you just need to replace your outer tie rod and you want to keep your alignment pretty much within spec, so that way you can drive down to your alignment shop after, you can mark where your jam nut and tie rod meet up. That way, when you replace your tie rod, you can just thread it back on and it'll be in the same position. Now, everyone always suggests that whenever you loosen this up and we get the tie rod off, you count how many threads it takes, like how many rotations to take it off. So sometimes it's like 12 or 15 or 16 times to fully loosen it, and then that will take the outer tie rod off. And if you tighten it, you know, the number of times that you took it off to like put it back on, it will be pretty much in the same spot where it was. But just marking it here is just extra insurance. So that way, whenever you tighten your jam nut down, you know, oh, okay, well, I tightened it and our paint markings lined up exactly where it was before. So it's just added insurance just in case if you forget how many times you took this off. So let me just go ahead and mark this and I'll show you guys. All right, all I'm doing is marking right here. Yeah, it's gonna get on another thread, but we want to worry about the location that we're marking it. So as you can see right there, we got our paint lined up, and we want to make sure we're on the second thread closest to it. So yeah, that's it. And then you can also line it up on the new one, be like, oh, this is exactly where it landed. But this part's not necessary. This is the crucial part right here. It's just marking right in here. And yeah, now you know where it's gonna go. So next up, we are going to loosen this jam nut. These are on pretty tight. This is where our 22 millimeter wrench comes in handy. We're going to loosen this jam nut before we take off our cotter pin and our castle nut over here. Oh, wow. That was actually not too bad. All right. Now that is loose, we can go ahead and remove our cotter pin and our calcium nut over here. So this is where our cutters come in. We are just going to bend this out of the way and pull this cotter pin out. You can just grab it like this. If it's really stuck on there, you can just cut it off, because most of the time whenever you buy new outer tie rods, it'll come with a new cotter pin. All right, so now our 19mm socket can come on here. We are going to loosen it up until we get it pretty much flush with the top part of this stud right here. And then we can use our ball joint separator to pop off our tie rod. All right, let's put the 19 on here. I'm gonna have to move the camera a little bit. Oh, well, that came all the way off, which is good. So now we're going to thread this on until it is just about flush right there. And all this is doing is whenever we put our ball joint separator on here, whenever it separates, usually there's like a lot of force and it just pops right out and the tool will go flying. This will prevent it from doing any of that. This will just keep it in place. So you're just gonna put that right under there. See, this part of the fork goes underneath the knuckle, right on top of the boot of the tie rod, and then this little piece of metal will be right on top of that stud. We will go ahead and just start tightening it. In my case, this one is, I think it's 24mm socket. Other ones will vary. You can rent these at your local auto parts store, so keep that in mind. You don't have to buy it. And what I prefer doing, I just like tightening it by hand, then taking an impact to it. This will just allow you to, slowly apply pressure, and then it'll just like pop right off. There we go. And there goes my light. See, that was a lot of force. It knocked my light down. And that castle nut staying in position did its job. That stuff is scary. It's like opening those containers of biscuits, and then it just like pops right out. All right, so now that is loose, we can take our calcium nut off the rest of the way and then remove the tie rod. Woo, there we go. All right, so this next part, remember how I told you that you can count the threads to take it off, and then you put the new one on with however many threads you took it off? This is where you start counting it. So with the jam nut, where it was before, it was right about there. The tie rod would pop right in there. So line it up, keep it in that same position, and then we're just going to loosen it and count the threads as one rotation. So let me show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. 16 and a half. 16 and a half. So the new one, we're going to start it like there. So write down that number, 16 and a half. So now, if you're just replacing your outer tie rod, go ahead, put the new one on, however many turns you took it off, snug this up, and then you can tighten down your calcium nut to 66 foot-pounds and then put the new cotter pin in, and you're good to go. Now, I know most of you are watching this to replace the inner tie rod, so let's move on to doing that. So first thing we're going to do, let's get into the car, turn the key on, and then just turn our steering wheel all the way to the right. This will extend the outer tie rod out, so that way we can get to the inner stuff a little bit easier. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, now we have plenty of room to do stuff. This is where our pliers come in. We're going to loosen this clamp right here on the boot. Oh, I almost forgot. So this this tie rod jam nut right here, we're gonna have to take off. So you might need to get an impact on it just to zap it off. There we go. That is nice and off. Now we can take this. Now inspect your spring clamp. Usually most of the time, these are still fine. These actually work out really good. So this is still good, we can reuse it. Now let's go ahead and make sure our boot can turn a little bit, which it can. So we're not gonna have any issues taking that off. So the next part, it's a little tricky. So this is where our pry bar and the hammer comes in. Let me try to get a good shot of what we need to remove. All right, so this is gonna be kind of hard to film, but if you look right here at the end of the boot, you're going to see a little clip. Now, the only way to actually take this off is to pretty much just break it off. It's like a one-time clip. We're going to put our pry bar right on here, right on that clip right there. And then we're just gonna whack it with a hammer until it just breaks off. All right, hopefully you can see this, but if you can't, then just do pretty much what I told you. So we're gonna line up our pry bar there and then just whack it a few times until the clip breaks. Sometimes you might need to get a shorter pry bar to get the angle on there. I think it's close to breaking. Yep, it's really close. I think a couple more hits and it will be done. Wow, this thing is like super resilient. What is going on? Oh, there we go. Perfect. So now all we have to do is remove the boot the rest of the way. So just rotate it and it'll pop right off. Now I'm not too sure if there's water inside of that boot or if this is just the power steering fluid, which no, it's not power steering fluid because mine is red. So I think this grease got some water exposed to it. I think part of the boot might have ripped, but I don't see any tears inside of this boot. Keep that in mind. If you see your rack leaking a lot, you're gonna have to replace your rack. Or you can take it somewhere to replace the seals. But usually if you see like fluid coming out, that's a sign that your rack is failing. But mine doesn't have that clear yellow fluid. So I think it might just be the buildup of like grease right here. All right, now that we have the boot off, there are going to be two little tabs, one here and then one on the top part that we are just going to hit with our pry bar. Right there, we're going to flatten it out, and then that will allow us to loosen up the tie rod end, because those are pretty much just like lock tabs that just get stuck in place. These aren't super tight from the factory or, you know, in general. These lock tabs allow it so that way you don't have to put any Loctite on the threads whenever you install this. So let's go ahead and knock those out and take this thing off. You want it in there like that. Sometimes you might need to come at it at like this angle. Just like that. Actually, one more hit. There we go. And then we're gonna do the same thing for this top tab. Perfect. All right, you see how the tab is just bent out? This top one's kind of hard to see, but it's the same way. Now let's go ahead and put our tool on here and loosen it up. All right, so how this works, you just need to loosen the 2 nuts in the washers, and then it will extend it out. You will slide this on here, and then you'll just get into a spot right about there, and then tighten these down. You don't need it extremely tight, just tight enough so that way it can clamp on there. Now this tool, it's a 3/8. I thought I grabbed a 1/2 inch one, so I have an adapter here. But all you really need to do is throw your breaker bar on here, and then you're just going to loosen it. Oh, just like that. Now I knocked the camera out of the way, but you can also throw an extension on it and you just, knock it that way and it will loosen it. So now that it's loose, we can go ahead and loosen these up. We can probably just take the tool off and then just spin the tie rod off the rest of the way. Just like so. There we go. Now we can install our new one. All right, so here is our new inner tie rod. So this is the lock washer that we had to, bend the tabs out. So with this, we don't have to knock it on every single one of these grooves. Some of these parts will just come with like a groove here and a groove on this side, like the OEM one did. This one does have a few different places. But this is just because like if you're in a tight spot, you might not be able to hit the other side in, so you can just lock the other side or, lock the other tab. But on here, whenever you install this, you want to make sure that these 2 little tabs face towards the steering rack, because there are 2 little lock tabs that keep this in place from spinning off. And this is why we don't need Loctite on the threads here, because this is just a lock washer. So let's go ahead and install this and I'll show you what I'm talking about. See right here on the steering rack, those 2 grooves right there, that's where our lock washer will just sit in place. They will sit right there. So this does come with a packet of grease. We're just going to put the grease on the inside right here. They already put some in there from the factory, but you're supposed to put extra right on top of here. So that way, whenever it like moves a little bit, it will have some grease to move. Just like that. So now we just have to install it. There we go. Now just slip the tool on, get it to where it's tight, and then we can crush those tabs in for that lock washer. There we go. Alrighty, so the last thing we need to do is just bend in these tabs, and you can just grab a hammer and just hit it until you fold over the edge here. There's one, and then if you can hit like the other side up over here with this, you can do the same thing. But since I can only reach pretty much this tab and this tab down here, I'm gonna just lock these two tabs in place. And then now you can just straighten out your steering wheel, and then we can slap our boot on and then put our outer tie rod back on, and then we are done. All right, so now with the rest of this grease, we are just going to put a little bit where this boot is going to rest on, which is just right here. This will be a lot easier to rotate in the future, so that way we can take off the boot. Now with this clamp, this is the OEM style clamp. We're just going to separate it, throw it around the boot before we slide it on to the rack itself. This will be a lot easier, so that way we can just clamp it down. So now that it's on there, let's go ahead and slide it on. We'll just rotate that whole thing on, get it into the locking point, which you will see the locking point right there. It'll just sit in place. So we're not going to lock that down just yet with the outer clamp. We just want to pop on the inner boot. You'll hear it clip right over the rack itself. You'll actually feel it slip on. There we go. That is on. It is nice and even. And then with the clamp, let me try to move the camera so that way you can try to see how this clamp goes on if you're using the OEM style one. All right, so since I can't get a good camera angle in here, all you're doing is you are going to make sure that the clamp slides in, like, okay, so it's like this. It's going to slide over that. There's this little tab right here that this ear or this like little hook needs to get pushed under. So all you're doing is grabbing this and trying to push it in. You might need to grab some pliers, like grab it on the back side of here and grab it on here and just squeeze it until it clips on over. It's gonna be really hard to do it on camera, so I need both hands in there and I can't get a good shot, but that's how this is going to get put on. Or you can just put a zip tie over it and just cut the end of the zip tie and then be done with it. All right, that was a pain to get on, honestly. It was stupid. Just use a zip tie. Now we can go ahead and just put our spring clamp on. There we go. And then we're going to thread our jam nut on. And then now we can put our outer tie rod on 16.5 turns. All right, so since my half a turn started here, we are going to thread it on. Let's see, where's the biting point? All right, so half, 1, 2, 3, 16. 16.5 is right there. And then let's go ahead and put this on. We might need to push on the tie rod just a little bit and then pop it right on. There we go. Let's go ahead and put our capsule nut on, torque it to 66 foot-pounds, and then we can tighten our jam nut. I'm just going to snug it down with my impact, and then let's torque it. All right, there we go. And let's go ahead and make sure one of our holes is lined up. It's not 100% lined up, so let's tighten it just a little bit more until that hole is exposed with that slot. There we go. Now we can go ahead and put our cotter pin in and then just bend the tabs over. Really doesn't matter how you do it, as long as this part of the cotter pin is seated in between that slot. Bend like one tab up. You can bend both tabs up. You can bend one tab up, put it to the side. It does not matter. All right, got the cotter pin on. Now we just need to lock down our jam nut. Get it as tight as you can. There we go. The jam nut is all locked in place. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do the driver's side. It's literally the same procedure, and yeah, then we will be all done. All right guys, there we go. I did both sides and it took probably about a little over an hour to do. Now, if you haven't done it before, just put aside 2 hours just in case you want to take your time and everything. It's really not that bad of a job to do. Now, the only thing I would say is that those OEM boot clamps that I got, you don't have to get those. I was just, you know, trying to do it and get it on there, but it was more hassle than what it's worth. You can literally just get a zip tie, put the zip tie around that part of the boot and just clench it down really tight and then just cut the end off so it looks clean. That's what a lot of manufacturers do whenever they send you other tie rod boots. But yeah, that's all you have to do. And I will link everything in the description below that I used. Hopefully this helped you guys out, and I'll catch you guys on the next ride.